South Africans are reportedly more positive about government now than they were before the local government elections. That's according to a survey of more than 2,000 people conducted by Good Governance Africa in the last quarter of 2016, before and after the August election. Good Governance Africa Director Dr. Alain Chuden is with us now to discuss the story further. Having said that, and good evening to you, you also make the point that 66% of respondents express some form of unhappiness with government at local, national and or both tiers. I mean, is that a vote of no confidence?
Well, Jeremy, I think that, what we see here is a mixed bag, if you like. What we have seen is that post the local government elections, happiness has increased marginally by 0.4%, but unhappiness has decreased by several percent. And I think on the whole, there has been some sort of signal flare shot up in the sky to say, look, we're not happy with what's happened, and we're going to exercise some degree of maturity by either withholding on our vote and abstaining from the process, or actually deploying our vote strategically and voting for someone else.
Without getting too philosophical,
yes.
How in this context do we define happiness and unhappiness?
Well, I think we've defined it in terms of government performance. So this builds on a corpus of work that we've done over the last 2 years, looking at how satisfied people are with the performance of the government in terms of service delivery, economic development and administration. And so that's, generally speaking, how we categorize happiness.
Do you ask the question, what then would improve governance?
Yes, we do. We've asked people in terms of different governance clusters, and interestingly, in, let's say, an ascending order, 6.1% of our respondents say administration would help improve the performance. Around 10%.
Administration being the paperwork, in other words.
Yes, so
getting it right logistically.
Compliance, financial soundness, right. Municipal capacity. Around 10% then look at economic development. We then have 20.5% saying that the cluster of service delivery is what's most significant to them. But a whopping 58.5% say that performance across the clusters would actually make them feel a lot happier. So on its own, service delivery, highly significant, but attention needs to be paid to all different sectors of governance.
You also ask the question about whether they believe their vote counts.
Indeed.
It's a contentious issue, given, I would suggest to you, that there is a lot of dissatisfaction among the younger voting demographic in this country. This is an important question. That's
right. And so we were pleasantly surprised by the result, to be honest with you. We have got 75.9% of our participants saying that they do believe that their vote matters. What makes this all the more interesting for us is the fact that when we ask a question about who governs South Africa at the moment, only around 14% of our participants say the people govern. So whilst there's a sense that people feel excluded from governance, there's an increasing realization, we seem to think, that people realize that their votes do matter and that actually the power ultimately does rest with them.
But at the same time, there's also disillusionment, there's dissatisfaction, I would imagine, about the freshness of ideas coming forward from the entrenched political parties. 7.6% of the voters feel influenced by a lack of attractive alternative parties.
That's correct.
That would cause some of the opposition parties tonight to start thinking fairly carefully about their position in all of this.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when we asked voters, about their voting patterns, 60% of our participants had voted for the same party that they always supported, but 29% abstained from voting, whilst 7.1% voted for a different party. And I think this does indicate that there's a diminishing sense of voting with hearts only, and the reason and reflection is coming into the pattern much more. And we know that South Africans generally and traditionally are quite emotive when it comes to issues around voting. But this, as we've said, reveals some sort of sense of increasing maturity on the part of voters who are having a pretty long, hard think about how they want to vote.
Given that we're approaching 2019 and there is a lot of conventional wisdom which is suggesting that coalition is a word that we need to start focusing on with perhaps a greater degree of alacrity, you ask the question whether a coalition government would work within their community. Are the results surprising?
Well, the results are somewhat surprising on the one hand, because there's literally nothing in it. 38.5% felt that in their local community a coalition government would work. 38.4% said they didn't think it would.
So it's neither here nor there.
The jury's out, and 23% simply don't know. And I think, so what's unsurprising is that given our legacy, that pre the advent of democracy, we effectively did have one party in power. And since democracy has arrived, we have only had one party in power, nationally speaking. People aren't quite sure of what to make of this interesting phenomenon. And I think that this is also, this signals something of great interest in terms of building up to the next elections.
Has this question ever been asked before in a different incarnation? And whether those 38%, either yes or no, have thought differently?
Well, Jeremy, I'm going to take the fifth on this one. I mean, I can't state that it has been asked directly in this way before, but I think that if we look at the movements along the multi-party scenario on the political landscape here, this is something that is quite refreshing for us as democracy. The honesty of people saying, look, we really just...
We don't know, but the fact is that some people are starting to think about it.
That's right.
Which is interesting. And the really good news, and I'll save this one for the end, 76% believe the best mode of government is democracy. That's a thumbs up.
Absolutely. I mean, thank heavens for that. And luckily for us, and a big thumbs up, is that only 2.5% felt that totalitarian government was the way to go. So I think these are all positive and healthy signs for the democracy, and a signal alike for citizens and those in positions of governance to just engage us constructively, proactively, and collegially.
So what do politicians take out of this?
Well, let's wait and see. We're anticipating some interesting responses. I think, again, the area of a coalitional approach to governance is an exciting one, because parties are going to have to rediscover the art of diplomacy and negotiation and meet each other in the middle ground.
The survey is called Good Governance, Africa's Voter Sentiment on Governance in South Africa. That's a Good Governance Africa Director, Dr. Alain Tuten. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
This is Newsnight, and here come the headlines.